Don't stop.
Hey, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randles-Friedman. I am doing some intros today, and one of the intros I'm doing is with a fellow podcaster, which is who you're going to hear my interview with today. And what I've said before, and what I'm going to say it again. What I love about doing this particular podcast is that I get to meet all these different kinds of people that I normally probably would have no interaction with, or I wouldn't have learned about them or found out about them. And so that's what's amazing about this, is that I get to learn about people's lives, and I get to share those experiences with you, and you get to hear about them, and they're inspiring people. And, I think it also makes me reflect on things about myself, and some of these guests had made me really kind of grown, and I've grown in so many ways because of this podcast, and just thought of things differently. And again, I've said this before in previous episodes, but the way I think about what happens after you die, and just how you should live your life, and having friends, and at what point do you walk away from things, and what's important in your life and what's not important, and what's keeps some people jaded on things. And just, I learned so much from people, and just maybe it's not from those people, but it's from the conversations that I have that make me think. Because just even when the episode's over, a lot of times I'll reflect back on it. Most guests make me reflect back on something, and I'll think about, maybe it can make me think about anything. Like, it can make me think about things that I'm grateful for, things that I've been uncomfortable at being a part of, or uncomfortable moments in my life, or when I cared what people thought. And, just all those things. This podcast helps me grow as a person. And again, I get to meet all these amazing people that, again, most of them are inspiring and aspirational, and just like the way they're living their lives. And it's so crazy that, this is how I feel about friendships today. I have some great friends. I have some close friends that I will be friends with for the rest of my life. But I think the people that I have, that I know now, I can count all of my amazing close friends on both hands. So let's say I have, 10 friends that I'm in not constant contact, but I'm in good contact with. And those 10 people are friends for the rest of my life. I know until the day I die, those 10 people will be my friends. Then I have some other people that are friends that I keep up with, and I've known for a lot of my life, and I'll remain friends with them. Maybe I don't talk with them once a week and stuff, but I care about them a lot. I want to see them at some point again. And so you have all these different types of friends. And then you have friends that, that are like kind of acquaintances that, maybe you'll see again someday, maybe you won't. You keep up with them if you ever run into them, great. And then you have friends that you just don't give a shit about anymore. And I think and I'm bringing this all back around because some of the people that I interview my podcast, I'm like, oh my God, this is somebody I would like to have in my life, because I think they're so amazing. I think their life is amazing. I think their story is amazing. Who they are, who they want to become, or where they've been and where they are now just makes me love them as a person. And there's just a couple of people that I have interviewed over the past couple of years, and I'm just like, wow, this person is they're fascinating to me. Their vibe, I just get it, and they get me. And I love it whenever I do a podcast, and it's not until the very end where I look at the timing of where we are in the podcast. I'm like, oh shit, I'm on a podcast, because I've completely zoned out and forgot that I was talking with somebody on a podcast. It's like And I realized this whole conversation was just recorded for other people to listen to. And that's when I know it was a good episode, because I've completely zoned out that I was talking to somebody. And those are the podcasts that I love the most. And that's happened so many times over the past year. And yeah, and that's where I'm at with my guest and friends. And I don't know why I went into this rant, but I just, the guy I'm meeting that you're going to listen to today, he has his own podcast, and he has an interesting podcast where his podcast is called the Randomness of Nothing Podcast, TRON. So he kind of built a show around things that he's curious about, or the humans behind the creation of certain things. And, he kind of says his podcast, you could think of it as the Discovery Channel or the History Channel vibe. And he's kind of just starting out his podcast. I think it's going to be really successful. Like, I really liked his energy and his vibe, and I liked what he was talking about. And he only does things that he wants to talk about, which I think is so important, because I think if your podcast gets too big and you have this whole team of people behind you giving you show ideas all the time and booking guests for you that you're not interested in. I mean, there's been some guests that I've had come on where I had no interest in kind of talking with them. And sometimes they end up I'm like, oh, that was actually a good podcast. And there's been only a few people where I'm just like, oh my God, this person, I had no desire. They were not at all who they were representing themselves as, or their publicist was representing them as. And when they came on, they did not know how to be interviewed, and they've never gone through media training, and they've never done a podcast interview, or any interview. And it was just like pulling teeth to get them to have a personality. And so it happens, but it's all part of the podcast world, and it's all part of me growing. And I think this is all part of my guest growing today, where he is probably going to experience the same thing, because he's early on in his podcast. But again, his podcast is growing successful. I think it's going to be a huge success, and I'm really glad I got to talk to him. So I hope you enjoy my interview today, and follow his podcast, and leave me a comment on this podcast and tell me what you thought about this interview, and also what you think about my podcast. I need some comments this year. So 2026 is going to be my year to get more comments and ratings, hopefully good ratings for my podcast. So enjoy. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. My guest today is a fellow podcaster, and those are the best guests because they know exactly how to talk and how to act and how to have good video. It's Rashad Woods. Welcome to the show.
Appreciate it, and thank you for your time. It's an honor and a pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about what your podcast, tell us the name of your podcast. And just for all my listeners, as you know, I will put links to all this into the description of the podcast or video that you're watching, but tell my audience what the name of your show is and what you do. Cause I listened to a couple of episodes, watched a couple of videos actually, and you got a good interview style. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's called the Randomness of Nothing Podcast, TRON. And so, I'm that guy that's either going to bore you to death or you're going to be intrigued by me. There's really no gray area, right? So anytime somebody's having a conversation, I would always have obscure facts, obscure notes, things historically that I just knew off the top of my head, and I could pinpoint and reference in sentences. And finally, it kind of dawned on me in the last couple of months. I said, man, let me make a podcast about my own curiosity. How did things function? How did things work? How did you create this? If you made a business, did you ever, how was the Sistine Chapel, painted hypothetically, right? So those are the kind of things that I was really curious about, because sometimes you can just exist, but you're not living, right? Yeah. And so my job was to find out how people were living.
And how are you finding your guests? And how long has your podcast been out? Let's start with that.
Yeah, since about April. Cool. I've had it.
Wait until you get past the first year. Okay. And if I know you're probably looking for guests, but after you get past the first year and a couple of months, you're going to get overwhelmed with people wanting to be on your show, and you're going to have to start turning people away.
It's funny, right? Because I still haven't turned people away yet. So, ultimately because I'm not inherently a rude person, right? So it's you don't want to say I can't do that, so it does get to be a bit much, right? Because, I'm on some pod matching, platforms. And what's really cool about it is I've had the fortunate distinction where I haven't had those guests that have been like, okay, this isn't going to work. Because I think the medium and the space that I've kind of cultivated, where curiosity, success, almost like a Discovery Channel, History Channel kind of mixture thing, has kind of like, those are kind of neutral, safe spaces for people where it doesn't dive into those kind of controversial things that, people can get very tribal, so to speak, with.
Yeah. I mean, there's just sometimes where somebody comes and wants to be a guest, and I might think they're a little interesting, but they want to talk about doing leadership classes at their work. And I'm like, that's not my show. So no one's gonna listen to that. Yeah. But have you had a guest yet that you've interviewed where you're like, I can't air this?
No, I've gotten actually quite lucky, right? I've had a couple people, I keep it PG, where they've kind of, gone on the cursing binge a little bit, and I've just had to hit the edit button behind closed doors. But no, there's never been one of those ones where it's just like, you know what, man, this is going to go sideways, and for the both parties involved, we need to not, go down this path. I have not, to this moment, knock on wood, had that fortunate situation. It will happen. I know it will. Lightning will strike.
I had one.
Also,
so I wanted to have somebody that was a MAGA. So, I mean, I don't talk about politics in my show ever.
Yeah, right.
But I wanted to have a MAGA person on my show that's gay, and I want them to tell me like how they became MAGA. And just for the record, I am not MAGA at all. I'm opposite of MAGA, and I don't care if people like you be what you want to be, but I need to understand like how you got there.
Yeah.
And so he just came on, and he was a gay Republican MAGA guy, and he just was bashing everybody and everything.
It went south on you. Okay.
It went south, and I'm like, and I'm still keeping it like I'm not judging him at all. I'm trying not. In my head, I am, but I'm not. On the podcast, I'm not.
For sure.
And he just went like, I don't know. He just got.
Yeah. And those are unfortunate, right? Because, in the reality for me is that in the space that I've tried to do, it's funny because I tell people, I say, I've never asked who anybody voted for. I've never asked who anybody worships or does not worship. And the reason, first of all, there's plenty of shows that people can do those on, right?
Exactly.
And I get where, your show, you're like, hey, I have a perspective I'd truly like to hear. And I'm not negating, curiosity or just perspectives of human nature. But for me personally, I was like, there's a million and one shows that always look for hot takes of what somebody said. And then for me, like the one wall I can kind of put up is this show. And I've just kind of put that barrier up where I'm like, I really just I don't do that on my podcast because it's exhausting, right? And I'll go a little bit further. If it's a hockey podcast, I'm not going to talk about basketball and baseball.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's a disservice to the audience to talk about a topic that isn't resonating with my audience. So I just stay away from those things. I just inherently I do. It just doesn't stir my doesn't stir my drink.
Yeah. So and I try to keep my show really positive, and people that are inspiring and people that are, and I just do people that I think are interesting or it's an interesting topic, and I just kind of go do whatever I want. So it's my show.
Well, and selfishly, that's why I don't do that, because realistically, and I've had people message me, that have tried to talk about like, deeply religious things. So in the context of something, let's say if you're an archaeologist, right, and you're in a certain country, a certain region, I don't mind the religious aspect of that. Like, right, because those are historical things. Like we've all watched like movies like Ten Commandments or things of that nature, and you're like, even if you're not, spiritual religious, you're like, this is a historical situation that resonates that could be respected with religion. But I have no intention of trying to push one thought process or belief onto the show over another. I think positivity, humanity, and well-being are universal themes that are irrespective of whatever lifestyle choice somebody adheres to.
Yeah. When did you, and if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to, when did you decide I want to be a podcaster, and do you have a kind of corporate full-time job also?
Yeah, I do work full-time. I won't disclose where I work for the purpose of this show. But I think that it's funny. Like, I guess like before podcasts exist, I kind of always was a podcaster, right? So like, but I decided like, really in the last like 6-7 months, I need to put my head down and actually do it, because the reality about, thoughts is that it's hard to put yourself out there because you're concerned about what people could think.
Yeah.
When you're younger, it's funny, you watch a kid doesn't care if they trip and fall.
Yeah.
They don't care if they slip or bust their tail. They don't care if they really get embarrassed. They may be insecure, but if they fall off a bike, they get themselves right back up. When you get older, you start looking around to see if people start, thinking some type of way. And then the second part about it is that, there's 1,000,001 podcasts out there. So how am I going to cultivate and narrow my specific lane? There's 1,000,000 sports podcasts out there. There's 1,000,000 political podcasts out there.
Yeah.
But I thought this little lane that I kind of was in where I'm like, what do you do? How did you make what you did? How did you create whatever you created? How did you become this entrepreneur? How did you go off the beaten path? I've had the fortunate distinction of talking to people who have served in the military, from culinary artists to life coaches to people who have built software platforms to nonfiction authors. I have some upcoming people that are archaeologists, right? And I'm just like, holy smokes, I get a chance to talk about how you went globally and had a chance to excavate and be with teams. And this, your world can sometimes be your zip code, can be your county, and the world is much bigger than that.
Yeah.
And until you start doing the podcast like you did, whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, you got the opportunity to meet and speak with people and see worlds and perspectives that you would never have done if you had just stayed in your little pocket.
Yeah. I mean, my podcast has made me completely change my view on what happens when you die, because of the people I have spoken to. So, I've met such incredible, inspiring people.
Yeah.
I had this one woman, I'll just tell you that I had this one woman who was married to her husband for 17 years. He came home from a business trip in London. He says, I got to tell you something. I cheated on you.
Wow.
And she said, oh my God, like, what was her name? She goes, well, his name. And she's like, oh, what?
Wow. Yeah.
Then a couple months later, he said, I got to tell you something. I've been cheating on you for the last 10 years with men, women, everything.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And so her whole world blew. But the good part of the story is that she was so inspirational because she has made a whole life for herself.
Yeah.
He's living in some studio apartment now by himself or with somebody, but she's got a beautiful house, amazing kids. Like, she's got her shit together, and she's so amazing. And she's one of the guests that she was early on in my podcast, and I just loved her comeback story, like how she came back.
What's interesting is that, you start to realize just how many times people have picked themselves off the canvas, right? Because, you have some stories that'll make you cry. Like, it's not just about their career. It's not just about, oh, you created this. They'll be like, I overcame cancer. I was in the ICU. Mm-hmm. I got divorced. I was, financially ruined. I was at rock bottom, to your point. And so, oftentimes I think people look at somebody with a fancy website, and I'm not knocking that, a good speech and very inspirational stories of success, but they're like, I went through, hell. And so when you start hearing that, it really starts making you do two things. Number one, it makes you a better listener. And number two, it makes you give less excuses in your life, right? Because you talk to enough people, you'll have some stories that'll make you want to cry. And, you really, truly will. So I think that it makes you a more sensitive person, it makes you a more understanding person. I know sometimes podcasts can sometimes be a lot of flame throwing and a lot of, I get a chance to get this off my chest about this particular group of people. It can be a negative space, and it can be very, very, aggressive to the point where, like, this isn't the purpose that I wanted to cultivate. So if you can bring positivity into the world, I think that resonates very deeply with people.
Yeah, and that's what I want to do, and I want to give people a voice, and I want people to tell their story. I mean, I have everything from psychic mediums to I have everything. Like, I love talking with different people. So
think about the effort that it takes to get on here and actually be me, right? Think about, like, the time that it actually takes, the time out. Like, obviously, I think people do it because, privately they know it makes them a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not, again, I'm not pointing at any group of people in particular, but it's just like, I just find that kind of medium kind of exhausting. And I'm glad that, I'm talking to somebody who's trying to do the same thing.
And we'll be right back. Okay, and now back to the show. So, who's been your favorite guest that you've had so far? The
Oh
one that
boy.
you're like, oh man,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you left the podcast, which I've left so many podcasts where I'm like,
Mhm.
this is my favorite one, and then another one kind of like, okay, they're both my favorite, so who do I pick? Like, or I
Yeah.
think about them for like, the other weird thing about me is that I'll have a podcast guest, and I'm like, God, I want to be their friend. I want to go to dinner with them.
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to like. There's so many people that I like want to be friends with, and even though they don't even live anywhere near Boston, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
who's been yours?
I've had a few, I brought this woman up a number of times. One was Elizabeth Salaroo. She was in the UK. She's a luxury baker and luxury pastries and things like that. She's cooked for the family members of the
Wow.
royal family, right? And she did it from, she bootstrapped it, right? She did it all on her own. And I'm just like, to be talking to somebody that reached out to me that was like, this is what I've done to
Yeah.
create my luxury baking business. I'm like, first of all, irrespective of how you feel about royalty, that is absolutely fantastic that you get a chance to do that for a living. Like it's, over in the on our side of the pond, we may look at royalty like, like we don't really do royalty here, but
Yeah.
like that's a huge honor, being in that side of the world to be able to do that. Right. And then, another one was Barbara Wiseman. She does the Earth Organization. She's in California, and her company, basically nonprofit, does environmental causes like oil spills and wildlife preservation. And all of a sudden you're talking to her, and they have safaris they do and all sorts of different things involving earth sustainability and how we have to partner with the world to be a good steward of what we're around us. And you're just like, man, I never would have been able to talk to you if I hadn't done this show. And that's not a slam on any other guest, but sometimes you're just like, man, how did you find this line of work?
Yeah.
I
mean, there's some incredible people out there. How are you planning your show? Like, what do you have coming up for 2026 that you'd want people to know about?
I think the one thing I want people to know about is that the Randomness of Nothing podcast is certainly growing. I have over 70,000 downloads on Spotify, and I'm not in any way big up in myself, but I do this all myself, right?
Yeah.
I book my own guests, I interview everything, I upload everything all on my own. So anybody who thinks that sitting behind this microphone and recording is easy,
this is another full-time job I'm doing here.
It's tough, man. It's a tough one. It's a grind. But I think that right now when I see my stats and when I see I got people listening in Spain, I got people listening in Germany.
Isn't that incredible when you see that?
Oh my gosh, dude! Like you're like, what? You're like, seriously? Somebody is taking time out in another country and time zone and thought that I was interesting. Like this bum here, right? It's just like, like living, either in his house or, in his studio.
Yeah.
I'm not fancy. I'm not on like Sky TV or NBC or whatever, right? And you're just like, somewhere in the universe, you found what I was talking about was fascinating, which is amazing.
And so do you have I think I was trying to make a plan for 2026 about what I wanted to focus on, but my show's called Everything and Anything. So I kind of focus on everything and anything, and I'm kind of just taking the guess. So I'm not a good planner.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say I did have to hire an editor finally because the booking part is, it takes forever.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. And it's fun.
But I hired an editor, and I liked editing, but I hired a professional editor, and he's doing a much better job than I was doing. And it just took so much time off my table. Plus, he knows what he's doing. Yeah. And he gives me some advice here and there about, oh, this was a great interview. This one, you could have done a little better or whatever. And I want that feedback. I want that constructive feedback. So.
Yeah, and you find out real quick that you typically gravitate towards the things you're good at and ignore the things that you're terrible at. Like, I'm terrible at social media. And I mean, when I first got in, I was in college when Facebook dropped, right? So, it was all about connecting with your college classmates, and then it morphs into this massive, meta universe, and then all these other platforms, right?
Yeah.
I was still around when MySpace was a thing, right?
Same.
So, right. So asking me to be know all the algorithms and the hashtags. Some people truly love and live for that. I'm just like, dude, can you just post it? Hopefully I get some nice clicks. But you can't do that when you're trying to cultivate something really, large and good. That's the effort you have to put into it. So I'm like, I'm a good interviewer, I'm a good booker, I think, but do I want to be on social media posting? No, it's better to get somebody who knows what they're doing in that regard and making clips that resonate with people. I will say this for 2026, one of the big things that I really want to do is I want to be on site at places that make things and create things, right? So like, let's say if you make like plastic cups, right? And you could be like, hey, we drink a plastic cup every freaking day. Yeah, but how is it molded? How does it know to get the chemical compounds and the resins and the dye and the coloring and then the packaging to it, right? And then who are their customers, right? So like I would love to be able to, if you make stuff like that, if you create things like that, I want to be like, hey, on site, this is the chief technology officer, this is the product engineer, as much as you can show and disclose, how does this work? I think the next level of evolution of the show is to go to places that create things and be there when it happens.
Yeah, your podcast is going to do good because you have that super curiosity. So you're going to keep growing. Yeah. That's when a podcast is good. It's yeah.
I appreciate that. I think it's almost just because maybe I'm too stupid to make that stuff myself, and I need to talk to the smart people that do.
No, I mean, it's like if you're thinking that's interesting. So when you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, that would be an interesting podcast to listen to. So I mean, the other thing is I have an advisor, and we talk about imposter syndrome, and I don't know if you have that, where you're like, why are people listening to me? Like, and I'm like, why do I have this many listeners? And why is this happening? And how did my Instagram grow like this? Like, and he's like, you got to go with it. Like the numbers are there. Like, it's happening. Like, don't think that you're an imposter because you're not, because you've got real numbers. You were kind of saying that before, but somebody's listening to me in Spain. Like, how did that happen?
I think the number one thing that people do more than anything else, like, is for me was I had to be authentically me. Right. So, like, I can't be, and I'm not knocking it, I can't be Jake Paul, right? Yeah. I can't go in there and like, I'm not a shock jock, right? I can't go in there and say, let me be rude to somebody, or let me insult somebody, or let me do something outlandish to get attention. Because unless you're really like that, or unless, and I don't mean it in a mean way, or it could be that tongue-in-cheek kind of way. But the point is that, like, people who know me, they would be like, dude, what are you doing? Like, that's not who you are.
Yeah.
Right. And so it would be inauthentic, and then it wouldn't come across as well. So obviously the gold standard is, the Joe Rogans of the world that even though he's a mixed martial artist and a commentator, he really has a lot of nerd in him he's had Dan Aykroyd on there. He's had Neil deGrasse Tyson, it just gets to the pinpoint of curiosity. Right. So just because you look like you may like basketball, like I played basketball, I played sports. Right. But I don't resonate with sports all day.
Yeah.
I don't get drowned and I don't knock it. I got friends that love it. But I'm like, I would rather watch a documentary on World War II than watch 4 straight football games.
Yeah.
Right. Because those are the things that keep my mind kicking. I used to have an encyclopedia set in my room as a kid. And, I would just pull up random countries. Who led this country? How did this situation start? Why is this country in conflict with another? And I'm not here to talk about those things because those are C4 level conversations, but just knowing about it, right, are very important for my own mind and how I operate.
Do you ever want this to be what you do full time?
I'll just take it a day at a time and see how the show grows. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just appreciative of the audience and the teams that I've worked with and how things are going and functioning. So, I don't get ahead of myself. I'm just very happy that people are listening to me.
Yeah, same. Just when you're talking about Joe Rogan, like, he has some of the most interesting people on his show, where I love it when he's talking about, it's the nerd in me, where he's bringing in, talking about the aliens that are coming and all this stuff. I'm just like, God, I love this. Like I don't agree all the time with his political views and stuff like that, but he's got the best guest.
That's my point, right? So think about this for a minute, right? Like, how many people I had a gentleman, Bill Konklansky, I'm probably butchering his name, but he was part of the UFO of Michigan. So, like, the chapter, that was one of my earlier guests, right? So, like, you don't have to necessarily be like, I believe in this particular, green men are on the earth, but like talking to somebody who truly who has experiences or researches this or is involved in this organization and can dive deep into that topic, you can listen. Like 80% of podcasting is just listening and be like, okay, well, how did that get to that point? What, because they can be very compelling. This really happened to them, and then you start seeing that they have congressional hearings about UFOs. So was the person that was basically told they were the crazy kid in the 80s suddenly really actually telling the truth the entire time, right? And so it's almost like one of those movies that you watched as a kid. You're like, dang, man, he was kind of right, because if you ask me about extraterrestrials, I've always defaulted this statement: how come I never see one in my local Walmart when I'm walking? Like, show me one in the middle of broad daylight. Don't show me something at 3:00 in the morning when you had one too many drinks. Show me one when I'm parking my car and I'm walking in the store.
My most interesting guess was this woman. So do you know who Sean Ryan is?
No, I'm not. I do not.
Sean Ryan is a podcaster. Like, look him up. He has really, really great podcasts as well. Kind of like a Joe Rogan, but he has like these interesting guests. But he had a woman on named Angela Ford. And Angela Ford did his podcast. And she basically in the 80s worked for the CIA. And she did this remote viewing for the CIA. And her story that she said on Sean Ryan, and she said it on my show too when I invited her on. She said basically there was a person that they were a most wanted criminal. She said she's able to kind of find where this person was.
Amazing.
She said he's in Wyoming at this hotel next to this store or whatever. Yeah. And they're like, no, he's in Florida. The CIA or FBI, like, no, he's in Florida somewhere because it was something to do with drugs. She's like, no, I'm telling you, he's in Wyoming. Yeah. And they're like, no, we're in Florida looking for him. That's where we know he's at, somewhere there. A couple weeks later, they came back to her. She's like, he's in Wyoming in this hotel. They sent somebody there and got him.
Wow.
She's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Like, she can like kind of go back in time and look. Sean Ryan asked her a question that she didn't like. She's like, did you see Jesus get crucified?
Oh.
And she's just like, no, I'm not talking about anything like that. So, and I sent her an email saying, would you want to be in my show? And she said yes. And she got me over 250,000 views on YouTube.
That's amazing.
And I loved her. And she was just like, she was so awesome and just an awesome guest. And she's an awesome person. And just, yeah.
Because think about this right now. Like, it's easy to drive past your local grocery stores and go through your neighborhood, enjoy your free times and things like that. But like, how often would you get a chance to talk to a former member of the like, literally, like, that's not something that you can just bump into. So you have to have the platform to be interesting enough and curious enough, respectful enough, irrespective of the question that he asked her. I mean, there comes a point where you owe it to yourself to scratch that itch. To be like, how can I find out these things that I've always wanted to know about, but can't find it in my pocket that I live into, right? And so if you're willing to take those risks, if you're willing to put yourself out there, if you're willing to reach out to the right people, what you'll find out is a lot of these people really want to talk about the things. Maybe they couldn't talk about it because they worked for the government at the time, but now they're retired. They've moved to the private sector and they write books and they do public speeches. Well, one of the reasons that they need to start growing their brand or their post-life from that career is they have to go on shows, right? Even I've talked to dermatologists, and so even like, you think like, oh, your skin, well, it's the largest organ in your body. It's the largest organ in your, you better take care of it. You better know about that mole, that bump, that discoloration, because they can kill you.
Yeah. And we'll be right back. Okay, now back to the show. Do you have a dream guest?
I have a couple actually. I'm a big boxing fan. I would love to have Terrence Crawford. I'm not sure if you know who Terrence Crawford is.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Oh man, I would. It would. And then I've always wanted, like, this is gonna sound corny. I've always wanted to talk to Wesley Snipes. I
can see that totally.
First of all, like, there was nobody cooler in the 90s than that.
Yeah.
Dude, right? Like, so Blade, right? Like, I watched Blade about 500 times, right? Yeah. Like, literally, I watched, like, I dressed as Blade for Halloween. Like, you have to look at it. Sometimes, how you can see yourself in somebody. Here's a dude who's 5'8". He's African American. He does comedy. He does.
Is he only 5'8"? I thought he was much taller.
5'8", 5'9". No, Wesley Snipes is not that tall. from my understanding, maybe 5'10".
All the actors always look taller than they really are, though, because they're all
Right.
short, I think. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, in the 90s, right, there weren't a lot of black superheroes. And here comes this vampire killer that does martial arts. And I do martial arts, right? And so you're just like, I see Wesley Snipes in myself, right? Yeah. Now, obviously, he's here and I'm here. But, like, I would love to interview Terrence Crawford and Wesley Snipes because, I mean, those are my heroes, man.
Awesome. Mine is not reachable people at all, but you never know. Mine's Madonna, and then my other one is Michelle Obama.
I'm sure that the list to get them interviewed is very, very, very heavy.
I mean, you never know, though.
Maybe, no, you don't, man. And here's the thing, like, maybe before, and this is the beauty about social media and platforms, right? Like, before there was, like, and it's like singing, right? Like, before there was the gatekeepers for singing. If you didn't meet a certain record executive, a certain AR rep, or a certain assistant, somebody didn't grab your demo, and I'm prefacing this because I can't sing a note. There were walls up that people maybe couldn't get in. Hey, I live in a very remote location and nobody will ever hear me sing. Well, with the internet now, it's kind of broken those barriers down. It's like, to your point, like your show, like somebody doesn't have to necessarily fly out to try to hear who you are, right? You can do things remotely. You can galvanize, you can grow an audience organically on your own in times where you weren't able to do previously, right? So keep dreaming, man. Your show's doing great. That's not to say you can't get somebody like that.
So are you gonna try to contact Wesley Snipes one day?
I probably could. But I mean, I can only imagine how busy that guy is, right? And so,
but you never know.
You don't. I mean, I would be, man. That guy. It's difficult to put into words how big of a fan I am because, when you look at even the Marvel films, right? And then he was in Deadpool 3. It's like, yeah, and I'm glad they gave him that respect because the Marvel universe started with him when he did Blade in 1998, right? And so, here I am, 42, and all these movies are pumping out, and you're like, "Where's Blade? Where's Blade? Where's Blade? Are you guys gonna?" And then you see him, you're like, "Man, thank God." So, and not just that, but just he was one of the guys that, he would just go into White Men Can't Jump, Mo Better Blues, Money Train, which doesn't get a lot of credit, which is really good. And then he just, Rising Sun. I could go on about it. So, if he's listening, I would love to pick his brain.
You know what I'll do? I mean, I don't have a huge social media following. I think I have 14,000 followers on Instagram. I'll tag him.
I appreciate it.
I'll tag him on our promo video that I put out there. And who knows?
You never know. You never know.
This is the podcast for you, Wesley. Do it.
Hey, listen. And I would never ask him anything, personal, disrespectful, or anything, out of pocket. I would just be like, man, I'm such a big fan of his. And I would love to ask him about his martial arts because he's a very accomplished martial artist.
Wow. That's amazing. I don't know. For some reason, I have a vibe that you're going to get him. Not through me necessarily, but I think you'll get him.
Yeah. I mean, that guy deserves a lot more credit than he gets, to be quite honest with you. But it's funny because, when you do martial arts, and I talk about my martial arts on various other platforms, you don't realize, when you start looking up the celebrities that are actually accomplished as martial arts, you're like, wow, this person's a black belt in this. Wow, this person's really accomplished in that. So, somewhere in the universe, I see myself in that guy just because I'm like, he's a black belt and so am I. He kicked my tail, but, it's kind of fun.
Who else has done martial arts that would surprise us?
Who else? I would say I didn't. Ashton Kutcher is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
What?
Ashton Kutcher. Yes, 150%.
Wow, that's surprising.
Yes. So and I do Jiu-Jitsu, right? And so I don't think the average person who has never done Jiu-Jitsu really understands how helpless you really are until you've actually gone against somebody, right? The difference between a white belt and a blue belt is a mountain climb. I'm a black belt in karate, I'm a brown belt in taekwondo, but I'm a white belt in jiu-jitsu. And so in your mind, you could be like, okay, martial arts, I can translate there's a level of you're teachable. What that means is you're teachable and you're willing to listen. Your skills do not translate to something like that because it's all grappling and on the ground and on your back. But yeah, so Ashton Kutcher is a black belt. And then Ed O'Neill, Al Bundy.
Yeah.
Al Bundy's a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu.
What?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
That's the most surprising.
Yes. Yeah, you would never, was it Modern Family he was on, I think, a
No,
couple
he
years?
was on not Modern. Oh yeah, he was on
Was
Modern
it Modern
Family
Family?
too.
Yeah,
Well, I was thinking about a show from the '80s with
oh yeah,
Christina Applegate,
oh my gosh,
Married with Children.
Married with Children, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, Ed O'Neill. Ed O'Neill. Al Bundy is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And what's funny is when he got his black belt, you know how he always used to sink his hands like that?
yeah.
When he got his black belt, he made that same pose, right? And it's just like, so he always kept that in his mind with his character because it's his iconic role.
Do you ever feel like your topic sometimes, like, I feel like I get stuck on a topic and I go down a rabbit hole sometimes where I'm just yeah. I got to get off this topic. I can't have another guest on here talking about that, even though I think it's so interesting and stuff. And I'm like, I got to switch it up.
Yeah. I won't say anything, bad about any particular guest or anything in particular, but there are, certain, ones where you're like, okay, I would like to have more historical based, creator based, I made a particular good or service or product that I think can resonate with people who are creating physical things or make things. I would like to dive more into that. Even if you made like some sort of candy, I would like, so it's not a case of, I think all my guests are interesting. I want to continue to build the guests. I'm not in a position to as I'm growing it, maybe I could be more selective, but right now it's still growing. So I never want to, anybody who's reaching out to say, oh man, I do this, but so Rashad's not interested. But I would generally like to say, hey man, I'm a candy maker and, I have this obscure brand that's very successful. Here's what I think you should do. And I would like to find and kind of dive into that. I think that's more of the mold for 2026 is to get more into the making of physical things,
So you really you would do on-site interviews more than online?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Okay. I've never done oh no, that's not true. I've had early on I did, because I had people, my friends that were on my podcast, I did on-site. I mean, I would love to do, a live podcast, not online.
Oh, dude. Oh, for sure. Because think about this. I've even talked to like some restaurant owners. Like, man, let's do a podcast just from your opening of your restaurant, right? How did you, what foods do you serve? Let's do it some taste testing.
Yeah.
Let's even if you have a juice bar or something like that, how does your customers react? That's sensitive because they're still doing it in the line of business.
Yeah.
And so the timing can sometimes be very hard, right? Because is it authentic? Are you going to get people who really just want to eat and not have a camera shoved in their face?
Yeah.
Right. So it gets kind of like, I want to be respectful to the business owner because there's not really a right time, so to speak, to do that, right?
Yeah. So Theo Vaughn, I don't know if you've ever seen his podcast.
Yeah.
So he brought in a lunch lady from a school. Like
wow.
He does he brings in like these like random people. He brought in an Amish kid.
Yeah.
To talk about.
Man, that's awesome.
Like he just kind of like brings in but then yet he'll have like, I don't know, Jerry Seinfeld or somebody on his show. I don't know if he had Jerry, but he'll bring like in a big celebrity. So he does like the whole thing. And I kind of love that format where he could have whoever he wanted, but yet he's bringing in this lunch school lady and like just talking to her. And it was an interesting podcast.
Think about this for a minute, man. Like everybody at the end of the day wants their line of work or what they do or as a person to be appreciated. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you can, the lunch lady who, sweet woman, serves these kids, maybe he had a good experience as a kid growing up with the lunch lady. And he's like, hey, this is something I want to elevate you to talk about your experiences and your lifestyle. One of the more fascinating things that I eventually want to get into is I want to talk to like museums. I want to talk to historical, like I've reached out to a couple museums. Think about how much you walk in there, but do you actually get a chance for them to tell you about what they do? And their outreach and what programs they have to offer usually are cultivating them. But like, okay, if you're a science museum, like what got you into science? What got you into this field? What displays do you have up?
Yeah.
What's the context? What's coming up next? If you're more curious about the world that functions around you, you learn to appreciate it more, right? Because it really, how did people know how to make glass from sand? How did people how did you know? How did people know how to do that? Like, you know what I mean? Like the aqueducts in Rome. These people had no instructions, no math, traditional background. How did you know to get fresh water to a remote area, kept it clean and filtered, and then you have to do it by hand. You have to all do it by hand. And then you have to know the pitch and the angle to put these things at so that way it continuously flows and you get it to a community, right? I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people have to die, in that process to get those things to work. So the things that we take advantage of, readily available water, readily available food, sanitation, right? It's a dirty job. Nobody wants to talk about sanitation. How do we get fresh water every single day?
I wish you would interview somebody that could talk about the whole pyramid thing. Like, how did those really get built?
Man, that's coming. Trust me. That's on my bucket list. So, kind of to pinpoint where I come from, and I say this respectfully, I don't find any joy when people die, but when they have engineering disasters and they say this happened, how did they fix these things to make sure they don't happen again? It could be a train accident, and bless the people that lost their lives and their families. But what did they do to make things better from those trains so that way they didn't have those derailments later on? And then they find the flaw engineering wise, and you're just like, man, you can find good from your curiosity out of horrible events. It's not something you're just watching because people really did die. It's nothing fun about that. But the engineering perspective of it and the creative process from it, I'm fascinated about.
Yeah. Well, I think your show is interesting. I love how curious you are about things.
Thank you.
And the things that you're talking about that you want to do. I think go for them, because I thought everything you talked about, I would listen to that episode. So
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So again, the name of the podcast is called TRON. So it's the Randomness of Nothing podcast, which I love that name. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
And you're on all podcast platforms, right?
Absolutely. And I talk to people who are much smarter than me. That's why I asked them the questions and they made the things that they made.
And so go to the description of this podcast. I'll put links to the Apple and Spotify and to the website tronpodcast.com. Go check it out. And thank you so much for being on. You were an amazing guest. And whenever you get the podcast award of the year, I want you to come back on and talk about that.
Zach, I very much appreciated that. And then more importantly, Wesley Snipes, if you're listening, I would love to have you on the show.
Wesley, get him on, because if he gets on, then I feel like I'll get a free dinner from you or something. Like, I'd fly to Michigan and get
I'm fan out in a minute, man. I would completely fan out. So, no, I appreciate you. It's been an honor.
All right. Thanks so much for being on. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and leave a comment. And don't forget, check out the TRON podcast, please. So thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you. Appreciate you.